context can be found with Jeremiah, a prophet from the Old Testament. He felt compelled to warn us of something he called the destroyer, and he clearly foresaw how the entire earth would suffer its wrath. In Jeremiah 25:32 and 48:8 we read, "Disasters will soon spread from nation to nation. They will come like a powerful storm to all the faraway places on earth." Here Jeremiah clearly warns us that this future cataclysm will beset us on a global scale. He goes on to say, "The destroyer will come against every town. Not one town will escape. The Lord said this will happen." Here Jeremiah identifies the global cataclysm as being caused by something he refers to as the destroyer. So are there any similar ancient texts from this same period of time that give us the same exact wording? Yes, there is. For this we go back to the Exodus, which was as much a blessing for the Hebrews as it was a terrible curse for the Egyptians. In the aftermath of Exodus, the Egyptians had lost their faith. Their own pantheon of gods had proven impotent before the powers of the Hebrew God. Just as we felt compelled to understand why 9/11 caught us so unawares, the Egyptians needed to understand as well. So as the Hebrews began to write the Old Testament, the Egyptians simultaneously penned a massive anthology called the Great Book. The original text was written in ancient Hieratic and was later translated into Phoenician and then on into English. In its original form, the Great Book was the size of a modern encyclopedia, and it offered very precise historical accounts. Two such notable accounts were Noah's flood, or the deluge as it is more commonly known across the four corners of the earth. In the Egyptian account of Sesuda and Hanok, they described an ark very similar to the one built by Noah, and in much the same manner. Then there are the harbinger signs of the destroyer's return mentioned within the Colburn Bible have already come to pass, and it is warning us that what will come will be Jeremiah's destroyer. The Colburn Bible gives us many examples of what this is going to be like, and most notable comes from the Book of Manuscripts. When blood drops upon the earth, the destroyer will appear, and mountains will open up and belch forth fire and ashes. Trees will be destroyed, and all living things engulfed. Waters will be swallowed up by the land, and seas will boil. Egyptian accounts of the 10 plagues of Exodus. It is important to keep in mind their version was written by the vanquished, as opposed to the Old Testament account, which was written by the victorious Hebrews. There are many similarities between the two. For example, neither the Hebrews nor the Egyptians mention the actual name of the Pharaoh of Exodus. However, where they differ, and strikingly so, is in what actually caused the 10 plagues of Exodus. According to the ancient Egyptians, what caused the 10 plagues of Exodus was a massive object. They also tell us this same object caused Noah's flood and the destruction of Atlantis as well. Like the Hebrew prophet Jeremiah, they too called it the destroyer and have warned us of its return. In fact, the ancient Egyptians go to great length to warn us that Jeremiah's destroyer will return with catastrophic consequences for all of the earth and those who live upon it, and in these days. What remains of these ancient Egyptian historical accounts are contained within the first 6 books of the Colburn Bible, and they corroborate similar accounts in the Hebrew Torah, or the Old Testament as it is referred to by Christians. Scientifically accurate, these ancient Egyptian accounts read as easily as man-on-the-street TV interviews. This is why noted Planet X historian Greg Jenner says that the Colburn Bible is the Rosetta Stone of Planet X. This is because the Egyptian accounts are so prescient they unlock many Planet X secrets buried within the Holy Bible and numerous other ancient texts and folklore.
The The edge of the solar system and the Kuiper Belt continues to be a new frontier in astronomy. The search for Planet 9, however, has taken that new frontier and kind of kicked it into a higher gear.
Many people these days think that Planet X just generically refers to anything out there. Planet X is a very specific hypothesis from Percival Lowell. He thought the orbits of Uranus and Neptune weren't quite going around exactly how they were supposed to be going. So Percival Lowell did calculations and predicted where Planet X was and how big it should be. Clyde Tombaugh was looking for Planet X when he accidentally found Pluto. If you look at the New York Times headline from the day of the announcement of the discovery of Pluto, it says that it is possibly as large as Jupiter, certainly larger than the Earth. Everybody thought it was big because everybody thought it was the thing that Percival Lowell had predicted. And, you know, this is wrong by a factor of 250,000 or so. This is true until about 3 years ago.
Mike Brown and Konstantin Batygin have been on the trail of something big out there for some time. Now, Dr. Brown apparently wasn't satisfied as accomplice to the murder of Pluto, which was demoted to dwarf planet partly due to Brown's discovery of Eris, a distant planetary body that's larger than Pluto, and presumably is just one of many such rocks orbiting the Sun in the vast Kuiper Belt, out beyond Neptune. See, Brown also found Sedna, a minor planet whose elongated orbit takes it out way beyond the Kuiper Belt. It looks like it's been dragged out of the Kuiper Belt by the gravitational attraction of something. It was actually competing planet hunters, Chad Trujillo and Scott Shepard, who first noticed that several Kuiper Belt objects have these elongated orbits that are roughly aligned with each other in the axis of their elongation. They suggested the possibility of a large planet out there, dragging on these objects with its gravitational pull. But it was Brown and Batygin who first ran the exhaustive computer simulations and found a single compelling solution. A very, very distant giant planet with a mass well over 10 times that of the Earth, Planet X. And I'm not talking about yet another Kuiper Belt ice ball, like Pluto, Haumea, Makemake, Eris, Keor, Sedna, etc., etc., etc. This is a potential near-Neptune-sized planet. The catch? It hasn't actually been seen. The alignment of those weird Kuiper Belt orbits is pretty unlikely to have happened randomly, a 0.007% chance to be precise. So it seems pretty likely that something is out there. But did we really find Planet X this time? To quote Mike Brown, "This is different, because this time we're right." Existing telescopes should be able to see this thing, even if we don't know exactly where to look. But believe me, we'll be looking.
A mechanical model of the cosmos emerged, beginning with Kepler's laws of planetary motion and leading to Newton's law of gravitation. The cosmos, it was finally realized, was ruled by natural laws. Shortly after that, with a bigger, better telescope, Sir William Herschel in England discovered a new planet in the solar system, Uranus, a planet that was unknown to the ancients.
Now, the person who demoted Pluto, his name is Mike Brown, professor at Caltech. He is not very popular because, for obvious reasons, but he and his colleague at Caltech, Konstantin Batygin and Mike Brown, predicted that there might actually be a true giant ninth planet in the outskirts of our solar system. Whoa, okay, there are 6 of these things. Do you see a pattern? They're all pointed in this direction. Now, if these were just random objects orbiting around the sun, you would expect these elliptical orbits to point in random directions. The random chance of this occurring, the fact that 6 are pointed in the same direction, and if you actually tilt this figure, they are actually orbiting close to a similar plane. And so Mike Brown and Konstantin Batygin said, well, this is weird. You can't explain this. There's got to be something out there that is possibly shepherding the orbits into a particular direction. And after a lot of hard work, they came to the conclusion that, yes, you can actually do this if there's, in fact, a giant planet, they call Planet 9, with an orbit that is anti-aligned with the really extended orbits.
All right, we talked about Planet X. Why should Christians care? We gave you an introduction to the planets for those who maybe are not updated on astronomy. In the second portion, we're going to give you an introduction to miracles for those who may not be familiar with theology. And then we're going to combine the two to understand biblical astronomy or scientific miracles. And that might sound strange to you, but I want to explain it by the end. It's not strange. I heard somebody say this: before science, everything was a miracle. What do you think of that? I believe it displays the absolute arrogance of evolutionary thinking. See, as we look back in time, we actually find that people built roads, aqueducts, architecture that 2,000 years later still stand. Whereas none of our roads, none of our houses can last that long. And yet to assume that when we go back in time, these people were dumber than we were, they were easily fooled, easily tricked, they didn't have the same common sense that we have, you really would have to live with a contradiction if you believe evolution on the one hand, and then look at the evidence of history and civilizations and realize these people are very, very smart and used amazing technology that we still cannot compare to. So I want you to understand this. The Lord gave me this phrase: explaining a miracle does not make it less of a miracle. We can describe how life forms in a womb, but we can't create even a single rose. Life is still a miracle. We may describe how sickness gets healed by our immune system over time. But the miracle is in God's ability to shorten the time. Jesus, when we encounter Him, Jesus speeds up the healing for us. Explaining a miracle does not make it less of a miracle. We can describe how water turns into wine through fermentation over time, but we certainly can't do it at a wedding party, can we? With God, the miracle often lies in His ability to orchestrate perfect timing. You see, in Luke chapter 5, we find a story. When Jesus told Peter to let down the net, Peter and the other fishermen were not dumb. They understood that catching fish was not a miracle. The miracle was the timing. After they had toiled all night and got nothing, at the moment they obeyed Jesus, they caught a boat-sinking load of fish. The fish just happened to be there at that very moment. The apostles did not believe in Jesus' miracles merely because they could not explain it, but because no one but God could have done it for them. No amount of explanation could ever take away their miracle. Do you understand that? Explaining a miracle doesn't make it less of a miracle. It's conceivable, given enough time, that we might one day possessed the knowledge of how natural forces could part the Red Sea all by itself. And there are lots of people that try to say how it could have done that by itself, by natural forces. Okay, fine. But it doesn't explain away the miracle, because the miracle was in the timing. The Red Sea parted when Moses lifted up his rod. And then the Red Sea fell back into place the moment Pharaoh's army pursued their Jewish ex-slaves. The miracle was in the timing. The miracle wasn't in just the water standing up. Does that make sense? Because if you understand that, that's how God works in our lives. Most of the miracles we're waiting for is about God orchestrating perfect timing in our lives. And it's beyond anyone else's ability to do such things. So it doesn't really matter once you've had a miracle from God. It doesn't matter what the naysayers say. It doesn't matter how many people doubt it, because I know Jesus saved my life. I know He did at the time when I needed Him. I know He showed up at certain times when no one else could have been responsible for what happened. And that's what makes me a believer. Not because I can't explain some of the things He does. Sure, we can explain many things. But you can't orchestrate that kind of timing unless you're God. So now we come to Planet X. Get ready. Luke chapter 23, verse 44.
Religious gatherings outside the synagogue and Hebrew school are strictly prohibited.
Father, my time has not yet come.
The teacher known as Jesus of Nazareth is
45. Now it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. Then the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was torn in two. Matthew 27, verse 51. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Is it a miracle to tear a veil? Of course not. The miracle was it tore from the top to the bottom. Because if a man did it, would have torn it from the bottom to the top. See? It's always these things that people say, I can explain things, but God always has one up on humans. So when the veil was torn from top to bottom, the earth quaked and the rocks were split. What's interesting about this is at the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, there was a 3-hour eclipse in our time from noon to 3 p.m., plus an earthquake. Well, how is that possible? Have you ever thought about the fact that God just left us a clue about another planetary body? Why? Because the maximum time that our moon can eclipse a sun is 7 minutes and 31 seconds. Can't do any more than that. How can you have a 3-hour eclipse? Well, it's possible with the flyby of a much larger object, at least 7 times the size of the Earth. In other words, perhaps Planet X. There's always an explanation. The miracle was the timing. Jesus says, it is finished. Gives up the ghost. And then lights out for 3 hours. See, no human being can orchestrate that. Only God can do that. And then an earthquake as well because of the gravitational pull or the electric force of another planet passing by. So Yeshua's sacrifice included some major events, an earthquake and a 3-hour eclipse. There's a detail to this picture that I don't have time to explain, but there's some amazing things that happen at the crucifixion. It's not just merely, other people have been crucified, so Jesus' sacrifice is the same as that. It's not just mere crucifixion. It's all of the events combined and the fact that He was sinless and did it for you and me. Let's go to another biblical event, Joshua's long day. In Joshua chapter 10, verse 11. And it happened as they fled before Israel and were on the descent of Beth Horon, that the Lord cast down large hailstones from heaven. Heaven is where? Look up. A lot of things happen from the sky in the Bible. So these hailstones fell on them as far as Azekah, and they died. There were more who died from the hailstones than the children of Israel killed with the sword. Verse 12, Then Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Aijalon. So the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the people had revenge upon their enemies. Is it not written in the book of Jasher? That's the book of the righteous. Jasher is not a name. It means righteous. So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. That's what? 12 hours. Daylight. And there has been no day like that before it or after it, that the Lord heeded the voice of a man. A scientific explanation for the earth's rotation slowing down is possible. It's possible. The miracle was in the timing. The moment Joshua stood there on the battlefield and said, "Sun, stand still." There are scientific forces that could act on the rotation of the planet. Namely, planet X crossing the Earth's orbit on Passover in 1400 BC. That could have brought the meteor shower that killed more enemies than Joshua's army and extended daylight by 12 hours. All right, and this is a scientist who's done all the computations, so I'm not going to go through all that. On Joshua's long day, planet X could have looked 50 times the size of the moon. Could this be what Jesus spoke about in Luke chapter 21 when he said, "Men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken." He clearly is pointing us towards a direction that most of the church and the world are not looking. He says, watch out, something's going to happen astronomically. By the way, Joshua's long day, guess what, was recorded as China's short day. Isn't that amazing? In around 1400 BC. There are records of that. And then again, the Chinese, who have the longest astronomical record of any civilization, reported a guest star in 1054 AD. And that's also the same time when the British recorded, and there's a painting here, of some stellar body with a massive debris tail following it. And there's a drawing of that right there on the right side. Well, let's go to Noah's flood. I think you're going to be very surprised by this. We have covered Noah's flood extensively in the 4,000 Years of History DVD set. I think it's number 3. I've brought that teaching out to many churches, and it always attracts, appeals to the teenagers and the youth. They're just amazed. Noah's flood was really just an amazing incident, and it's full of science in the Bible. And so much of what we see today is a record. I believe all the fuel that we pump into the cars, it's a reminder of Noah's flood. Millions of dead organic material buried suddenly form fossil fuel. So for all the people who say, "I don't believe the Bible, I don't believe it happened," you're pumping it into your car every day. It's amazing, isn't it? But here today, I'm going to give you some new details in addition to what you learn in the 4,000 Years series. In Genesis chapter 7, verse 11 and 24, let me remind you what happened. In the 600th year of Noah's life, this is what people don't know. They thought it just rained for 40 days. It didn't. Number 1, it says, God said, "All the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were open." Which is an interesting phrase. It's not just that it rained. Something broke apart in the heavens, and something broke apart in the earth's crust. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. Please say 150 days. Okay, no detail in the Bible is extraneous or superfluous. Everything is there by design. Gives us a clue to something. And by the way, most things happen not once. Almost nothing in the Bible happens once. So everything that happens here is a prelude to something else. Only in Noah's flood, God promised, I'm never going to flood the whole world in the same way. Yet everything usually happens twice. So these details here, they'll be handy in the end times. 150 days. Because guess what? Book of Revelation also says one of the trumpet judgments will last 5 months. 5 months is 5 times 30 days, 150 days. Jewish calendar days are 30 days a month. Very interesting. There's parallels between Genesis and Revelation all the way through. Can't get into all of it. But here's what happened. The Bible is saying the flood was not mere rain for 40 days. It says the canopy of water that was ruptured from above. There was above the atmosphere another layer of water. Remember the firmament separated the waters from the waters in Genesis? There was water above. All right? And that was ruptured, and then it all broke apart and fell down. The earth's crust was also ruptured from below. And 150 days later, the waters receded. Well, how is that possible? Well, if you map out planet X's orbit, it seems that planet X has an orbit that crosses the Earth's orbit twice in a period of 150 days. So you see, point 1 is the sun, point 2 is the first crossing of the earth, point 3 is the second crossing as it leaves the solar system. So here's a scenario that may explain Noah's flood. Planet X crosses the Earth's orbit, and then each encounter brought debris and meteors upon the Earth. So here's the first flyby. On the second Passover, 3000 BC, remember Passover is the only feast where if you missed it, God gave you grace, you can celebrate it a second month, the month later. Well, Noah recorded that on the second Passover, 3000 BC, or 5,000 years ago, the waters broke from above the heavens. Well, a meteor shower would have done that, right? Small meteors would have opened the floodgates of heaven, shattering the upper firmament that divided the waters from the waters. Then, 5 months later, it makes a revolution around the sun, comes back, the earth happens to meet on this occasion. The debris of planet X, once again, as it exits the solar system and the Earth's orbit. And so this is probably what happened. 150 days later, a second flyby of planet X drags a 110-mile wide asteroid into a collision course with Earth. And there's a reason why we have quite an exact figure on the size of this asteroid or this meteor. We'll show you in a moment. But we have to say asteroid because it's so big. Here's a moment of impact. A scientist calculated at a trajectory of 22, or an angle of 22 degrees. There's the moment of impact. It would have sent shock waves into the Earth's core and all throughout the Earth. And that would have ejected some of the Earth's crust, leaving basins for water to recede into, which today forms our oceans. Something catastrophic happened. Now, science always denies catastrophic events until catastrophic events happen. Did you know that last week an earthquake, 7.7 earthquake in Pakistan, created an island like that? If you don't know, just go on the news and see it. They always say over millions and millions and millions of years, and yet on the news, turn it on, boom, an island just got created. In the same way, something suddenly happened and the waters then receded. Something scientific, something explainable had to have happened. Well, a 110-mile diameter meteor or asteroid would have impacted the Earth, and the planet X gravitational electric influence would explain the start of Noah's flood, canopy broke, the end of the flood, a meteor came and then ejected some of the crust, which left basins. It would also explain the tilt of the Earth, without which we wouldn't have seasons. So at the moment of impact, the Earth was pushed 23.5 degrees, which allows for seasons. I always believe in the beginning, God didn't have, there was no rain in the beginning and there were no seasons in the beginning. Why do we have seasons? Because this impact at Noah's flood tilted the Earth. Now we got seasons, winter, summer, and all that. And it would have also cracked the Earth into tectonic plates. Does the Bible talk about this? Yes, it does. Isaiah 24, verse 19 and 20. Behold, the Lord makes the earth empty and makes it waste, distorts its surface. Verse 19, the earth is violently broken, the earth is split open, the earth is shaken exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard and totter like a hut. That sounds like the Earth's 23.5 degree tilt. Planet X could provide a scientific explanation for all these things we observe. The Earth's crust is definitely cracked like an eggshell into tectonic plates. What we see on the globe is not exactly the plates. Underneath, they're all cracked. Now, one problem a scientist had with this was that if such a large impact had occurred, the amount of heat that would have been generated would have wiped out all life. That's just the physics of it. And so this person who didn't believe the Bible challenged this other scientist who believes the Bible and says, well, you got a heat problem. It's just impossible that this happened 5,000 years ago. He says, well, how about this? What if the entire surface of the planet was covered in water? Isn't water a perfect conductor of heat? Would have absorbed all the heat. In fact, I saw on the news today, global warming scientists, because they're having a real hard time now explaining global warming. They're saying, oh, well, the ocean is such a good conductor of heat. Global warming is happening. We are responsible, but the oceans have absorbed all the heat. You see, the miracle was the perfect timing. He says, get in the ark. The meteor shower came. Planet X could have passed by. Maybe that's the gravitational force that pushed all these meteors in Noah's way. He got in the ark. He was safe. Then it came. Then the big meteor that helped the waters to recede came at the moment where the entire earth was covered with water, absorbing most of the shock, most of the heat. Amazing? God is amazing. His miracles usually involve perfect timing. Now, the question remains, is there any evidence of such an impact? Are we just kind of making is this wishful thinking? Well, I'm going to show you something that you will never forget. Most truths are staring at us in the face. It's right in front of our eyes, but we don't know it's there until somebody points it out to us. So I want to point it out to you, the evidence of this impact. It's called the Gulf of Mexico. This is a perfect circular crater left by an impact of an asteroid. Does that look like a perfect circle to you? Pretty much for geography. Compare that to the Arizona crater, which is 0.7 mile wide. The Gulf of Mexico's crater is 1,100 miles wide, and we usually calculate that a meteor is 10% the size of the impact crater. That's why we have quite a good idea of how big this thing was that came at the end of Noah's flood, or as the waters receded. What's interesting is if we take pictures subterranean, sub-ocean pictures, we also can see there's a visible landslide under the ocean. Can you see that? At the top of the circle? The land slid into the ocean in the distant past. And if this has happened before, this area from Houston to Louisiana to New Orleans is a high-risk area for collapse a second time if there was another Planet X pass by. So Houston to New Orleans could be unstable. Also, you know that oil and gas are found in abundance in this area because plant life was buried suddenly by a previous landslide. So 70 to 80% of America's domestic oil and gas flows through the pipelines of this high-risk zone. Now, the shock waves were sent around the world. Is there any evidence of that? Sure there is. It caused an uplift on the other side of the planet. It's called the Himalayan mountain range. Take a look at it. It's a perfect curve. It's the same curve as the Gulf of Mexico sent to the other side. In other words, Himalayans were formed in a matter of seconds. Number two, it also means the highest peaks of the Himalayas did not exist at the time of Noah's flood. So a lot of people like to argue and say, well, how much would it have to rain to reach all the way to the top of Mount Everest? Well, excuse me, there was no Mount Everest. Amazing. God has an answer to everything. And it's right there. It's staring you in the face. Next time you look at the globe, it's all there. But I'll take you even further. This is a NASA satellite map of gravity. Did you know that gravity is unevenly distributed on the Earth? You are slightly heavier in Asia. That's why we have to eat rice and not pasta. You're slightly heavier in Asia because the land density is greater. Well, what could have caused that? It indicates pressure wave. A powerful meteor impacting during a total global flood is a logical explanation for this anomaly on our planet. Let's talk about future implications, because that's the part everyone wants to know. What does this matter to me? Well, if you've not gone through my End Times and Revelation series, I'm going to do a very quick run-through. Revelation is a timeline. Revelation indicates that worse things will happen during the 7-year tribulation. I think that's pretty scary, don't you think? So we don't want to be there for that. We want to believe Jesus now. We want to accept the Savior now. He's giving us warning through all of this prophecy and science. You don't want to be here for this. Well, could Planet X be the explanation for these events, these judgments in the book of Revelation? And if so, when is Planet X, or Nibiru is another name for it, when is it coming back? All right, you remember that I told you the 7 seals, or 7 pre-tribulation seals. There are the 7 trumpets from chapter 7 to 10. And then the 7 bowl judgments from chapter 16 to 19. These are all timelines. 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls are just word pictures for judgments. That's 21 judgments in total. In other words, 21 events in sequential order. Next week, we're going to cover these in order, right? Not this time. We don't have the time to do it, but I promise you we'll get to it. You will see Revelation like you've never seen it before. What we know, something is coming. That's what the book of Revelation is saying for sure. I'm going to give you just 2 of the events. The 6th seal, I believe we're waiting for it, or we're in the midst of it. Revelation 6 verse 13, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth. What are meteors called? Falling stars. The stars of heaven falling to the earth are meteors. As a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind, then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up. And then the church age ends. Tribulation begins on the 7th trumpet. I believe rapture happens on the 7th seal. So in other words, the church age closes with a meteor shower. But not a bad one. This is the revelation God gave me. You can take it or leave it. But in all the other places during tribulation, he says when there's a meteor shower, hailstones fell on top of them. But at the close of the church age, we'll see something, and he calls it, it's like figs dropping. Well, question, would you rather have a fig drop on your head, or would you rather have a stone drop on your head? Yeah, I'll take figs anytime. What do the figs mean? I think God is saying, you're going to see it, it's not going to hurt. Well, guess what? The scientists have just found this week a meteor shower, unprecedented meteor shower, is due, and they've already put a date on it next year. And it's all in line with the tetrad, the solar eclipses, lunar eclipses, all the stuff that we've been talking about. It's right there. I'll show it to you next week. All right? So we know that's true. And then the first trumpet, which is the tribulation, starts. Revelation 8 verse 7. And hail and fire followed, mingled with blood. And they were thrown down to the earth. And a third of the trees were burned up. And all green grass was burned up. In other words, tribulation starts with a massive meteor shower. And this one hurts. This one, a third of everything gets destroyed. A third. Not bad. God says a third is destroyed. In other words, 2/3 escapes unharmed. So the question has always been, well, what does that mean? How can a third of everything be destroyed? But you know, the answer is staring us in the face. Once I show it to you, it will be as clear as day. You ready for it? How can a third of everything be destroyed? Why would God tell us such a thing? Well, take a look at the globe. Asia, Africa, and Europe make up 2/3 of the landmass of the planet. North and South America make up 1/3 of the landmass and also 1/3 of the oceans. Take a good hard look at that globe. Revelation 8 is predicting which side of the earth will be struck. Scientists will make an erroneous calculation because they have no model for a 12-hour rotational delay. In other words, when this thing starts coming close, scientists will say, this is the safe side. America will be safe. But God had recorded in the book of Joshua that one of the times when Planet X passed by, it actually caused the rotation to slow down by 12 hours. Unless you're a Christian, you have no concept of that. Unless you believe in the electric universe, you won't even suspect that could happen. There's no model for that. And so what I believe will happen is as the meteors come, just like the Bible says, instead of repenting and saying, God is right, I want to believe the Bible now before I get killed, they say, science will take care of this. We're so smart, we've already predicted where it's going to land. It's going to land in Asia, Europe, the Middle East, Africa. And I believe people will buy tickets and get on airplanes to go over to the Americas and not realize they're going to their doom. And they will die there. And that's why in the book of Revelation it says, when Babylon goes up in smoke, everybody cries. Why? Because they didn't expect it. They thought, no, America's going to escape. The rest are going to get hit. Then suddenly, within 12 hours, the whole picture changes. You can't leave the continent fast enough. And then everybody starts wailing and crying, oh, Babylon, Babylon, how great you were. We didn't expect it. Well, you know, the scientists always say like they expect everything, they can calculate everything. But you need to know, this is why I say you need the 4,000 years of history. You need to know the whole gamut of the Bible. Now all the events will line up. All the events will become relevant to understanding the book of Revelation. So how true God's word is. In Hosea chapter 4 verse 6, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. I believe even Christians will end up, instead of trusting the Bible, they will trust their astronomers, their scientists, their government, saying everything's going to be okay. Everybody fly over to America. It'll be the safest place in the world. Now, by the way, I had some YouTube commenters say, well, they like me until I start saying bad things about America. I'm not saying bad things about America. I like America. You notice I'm an Australian who speaks with an American accent. I lived in New York for 10 years. I was educated, got my bachelor degree I started in America and finished in Canada. So I am a friend of America. And I'm telling the American watchers, trust the Bible, believe the Bible. If we see this warning from scientists, they say this side is safe, I bet you the truth is just the opposite. The other side of the earth will be safe. So I personally believe we are favored. I believe Australia will be safe. I believe for sure Israel will be safe. I mean, you want to go to a safe place, you better go to Israel. Amen? That will be the safest place. But I think Australia, we're on the other side, the 2/3 side, which should be safe. So don't reject the knowledge of God, the knowledge of the Bible. Trust God. Don't just trust in the words of man, because the words of man will send you to hell. Amen? So now the question is, can lightning strike twice? And what I mean by that is, we know what's happened before. There's a crater right there that forms a near perfect circle. If the meteors of the tribulation struck America, then lightning would strike twice. There will probably be a scientific explanation for every disaster that will happen in the book of Revelation. But the miracle is in the timing. They will occur in sequence predicted and at the time leading up to the Messiah's second coming. That's the miracle. The miracle is perfect timing. Romans chapter 5 verse 6 says, in due time Christ died for the ungodly. Meaning, it couldn't have been a better time. God could not have picked a better time to send his Son when the world was unified by the Roman roads, by a common language, the Greek language, and the news could spread very fast. At the perfect time in the perfect place, the Messiah came, changed the world, split time in half. There's no one like Jesus. He's not just like Buddha or Muhammad or these other people, Confucius. He is unique. His claims are totally unique and different from everyone else. And God said, in the perfect time, he sent forth his Son and he died. Even when we didn't know we needed to be saved, he took care of our sin problem so that today we can hear that he is the salvation that we need.